My name is Shauna Sheldon, Executive Director of the Museum of Contemporary Art, North Miami, and I'm excited to be moderating this virtual conversation with Director Barak Heymann from the film High Maintenance, which is premiering at this year's festival. Thank you for joining us. Welcome, Barak.
Hello, how are you?
I'm great. How about you?
I'm good. I actually miss Miami Jewish Film Festival quite a lot. I've been there 5 years ago with Mr. Gaga, if you remember, and it was a beautiful experience. I think it was Igor that was the director and he moderated the Q&A, and I'm very, very happy to be back in the Miami Jewish Film Festival, even though it's only through the computer, but it's still better than nothing.
And where are you today?
I'm in Tel Aviv, Jaffa, in Israel, where I live, where I'm located, and where Danny Caravan, this man whom I made a film about, was born 91 years ago.
Amazing. Well, I'm really enjoyed your film and very excited to dive into it a bit with you today. Let's start by talking a little bit more about you. So did you grow up in Israel, and how did you get into filmmaking?
Not only I grew up in Israel, my parents, who are now more than 80 years old, were also born in Israel. I was living in New York, actually, in 1997 for 2 years, and my brother Tomer, who was already a filmmaker, came to visit me in New York and told me, hey, come back to Israel and let's make films together and let's do art together. And I was like, I don't care about films. I don't care about documentary. I want to live my life here in New York. I love it here. I don't care about Tel Aviv. I don't care about Israel. I'm never coming back. And then I fell in love with this young Israeli, amazing girl. And I went back to Israel because she went back to Israel. And after 2 weeks, of course, we broke up. And then I found myself on the sofa, on the couch of my brother Tomer, who is my partner for Heymann Brothers Films. This is a little production company where I'm sitting right now. And I kind of joined him to this journey, to this company that he established 20 years ago, and ever since then I've been directing and producing documentary films and documentary series for cinema, for TV, for the internet, and I love it and I enjoy it. And this specific film which we are talking about, that is part of the Miami Jewish Film Festival, High Maintenance, the life and work of Danny Caravan, is very dear to me. It took me 4 years to complete it, more than 300 hours of materials, which I was filming along the years. And it's actually a little funny story because this guy, Danny Caravan, is very, very well known in Israel and also worldwide, because you could say that he's one of the biggest, most successful, most famous Israeli artist ever. His works are being shown in all over the world. He has nearly 100 different works. He's a sculptor who is doing like huge installations, huge monuments. Some of them are a few kilometers long. They are quite spectacular. They are huge and amazing and beautiful. And if to be honest, I was not aware at all of how big and how amazing he is when I started to make this film. I knew the name because every Israeli person have heard the name Danny Caravan at one point of his life, because he's a very well-known figure. But if you would ask me 5 years ago, who is Danny Caravan? What did he do? Maybe I would be able to mention one work by him. Maybe, I'm not even sure. Some works of him I knew, but I didn't know that he is the one who created them. And then I was showing the film that I produced and my brother Tomer directed, Mr. Gaga, about Ohad Naharin, the artistic director of Batsheva Dance Company. This film that was shown with me in the Miami Jewish Film Festival 5 years ago. And At the end of the screening in Italy, it was the opening night of Festival di Popoli, a very great documentary film festival. This woman came to us and she said, wow, thank you very much for your film, Mr. Gaga. It was so beautiful. But what about my father? And we asked her, what do you mean, your father? What are you talking about? And she said, well, my father is Danny Caravan. Why don't you make a film about him also? He's also a great artist. He's also a very colorful person. You will have a great time with him. Why don't you make a film about him? And we didn't know what to say. Like, what kind of a weird question is it? Why not to make a film about someone? Usually we ask ourselves why to make a film about someone, not why not to make a film about someone. And then I said, okay, you know what? I come to talk to your father. So I took a little camera, I put it on the tripod, just as a very basic visual research kind of action. And I went to his studio. I was sitting with him for 3 hours and it was unbelievable interview because I didn't even have to ask one single question. He was just talking non-stop for a few hours and I just loved him so much. And he was at the same time so arrogant and so anxious and so angry and so bitter. At the same time, so sweet, full of life, so funny, so smart, and so loving. And this ambivalent, emotional feelings I had towards him gave me the confidence that he can be an amazing heroine of a film.
Incredible. And so there was just no question from the moment that you met him that there was a film there.
Yes.
Incredible. And, you know, to speak to your point about the different sides to his personality, I mean, you convey that from the very early moments of the film when he is declaring, you don't know Guernica in those first few minutes of the film, and then really see the complex character and also the amazing character that we get to know more and more throughout. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what it was like creating? So you have this idea to start. Where do you go from there?
Usually what I do is I start spending more and more time with the main protagonist of the film, with and without the camera. And then I get to realize what is interesting for me. So for example, I realized that if I go to film his work, when he's not present in this moment, it's boring. I don't care about it. It's nothing, it's nonsense. But when he's joining the trip, and when he's part of the situation, then all of a sudden it's magical because he's always getting upset with the condition of the maintenance of his work, and he's always calling his wife. So those two rituals are repeating themselves. And then also I realize that this whole thing about his memory, that he's starting to slowly lose his memory, while most of his works and most of his sculpture and most of his monuments are dealing with memory. It's interesting, like the relationship between those two elements of his life, of his work, are interesting. So I start realizing what is effective emotionally for me. And this is usually how I work. If I get bored, I cannot fake it. If something is boring me, it will be boring for you also, because if it's boring for me, then you will feel that I am bored by the way I'm filming it, by the way I look at it. But when I'm being moved, when I laugh, when I get angry, when I'm being anxious, when I'm surprised, when I'm curious about something, then you will, as a viewer, will feel the same emotions and the same feelings when you watch it on cinema or in Miami Jewish Film Festival or wherever. So this is how I try to make my films. I always think about myself as the one who is watching them. So I need to make a film that I would enjoy watching. So if, for example, going back to the history and going back to his childhood and going back to talk about his parents, which maybe on the paper is interesting, but when I start to talk about it with him, I'm not feeling anything, and it's becoming a little bit flat, then I just don't put it in the film and I don't dig too much deep into it because it's not touching my heart and my stomach. But when I follow him to all those times when he's going to the doctors to check his health and his memory, and when I go with him in Poland and in Germany and in Spain and in many places around the world to see how is the condition of his works, and when I go together with him to his house with his wife and with his daughters, and when I get into very intimate moments, and when I travel with him all over Israel in between his works and also in Germany and in many other countries around the world, and there are interesting, surprising, spontaneous encounters happening in front of the camera, this is where I feel alive. This is where I feel that there is some magical documentary moment happening, and this is what hopefully you will feel as well when you watch the film.
Well, I will say that I was on that journey with you, and I did feel those things and thought the film was so successful that way. I also wanted to hear a little bit more about that research process, because you did do a bit of traveling and so beautifully throughout the film conveyed these massive installations and sculptures. Can you tell us a little bit about that process?
Well, it was not very well planned. It was like, let's say, obvious that we're going to film in Cergy-Pontoise, next to Paris, where he has this axe major, like this 3.5 kilometers long piece of work, which took him nearly 40 years to complete. So we went there with him, and we didn't exactly know what will happen, and this is how we work. We go there, and then we try to understand what is happening, and I don't try to force my preconceptions on the moment. Like, if something is happening in the moment itself, then usually that will be the most authentic thing to document. Now, if it's boring, then I will try to start provoking him with all different kind of annoying questions in order to bring some fire out of him, which is not so difficult to do, as one who has watched the film can notice. But about the other places around the world, I'm just going with him, first of all, to the places where he's naturally going. So I just follow him. And sometimes when there is something which is for me very important to document, then I initiate it. So for example, some of the political elements of the film, which are for me very important because I am myself very political, then those moments were initiated by me. There were demonstrations where we went together that he didn't even know about, but once I told him that they exist, especially when they take part inside of his own installation, like in the Culture Square in the heart of Tel Aviv, then he was very much happy and enthusiastic to join me and to go there. So it's not artificial. It's not something that he's doing against his will. He's very happy to do it. But if I was not inviting him to go to those places, maybe he wouldn't go. But this is my way of making films. I'm not fly on the wall. Sometimes I am. But in many other situations, I feel like I have to not only document the moment, but also sometimes to create it.
No, absolutely. I certainly made note of the theme of art and culture and politics that came through throughout the film. Caravan also spoke to his interest in human rights and equality throughout this film and his work. And he specifically spoke about his work at the Knesset and how he never signed work except for this one piece that was specifically in Hebrew and Arabic. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Well, I can tell you that even though he was very, very, I don't know how to say, bothered and troubled by the condition of his works and the low level of maintenance of his works around the world. And even though he was very worried and upset about his own condition of maintenance, his body, his mind, his memory, what pissed him off the most and what hurted him the most and what put him down the most was the condition of the state of Israel and the very, very, very low level of morality and justice and democracy here in Israel. That was the one thing which drove him crazy the most. And this is also, I believe, one thing which we shared and we had in common, because I'm very much attracted to those places and I'm very much invested in those kind of political activities, demonstrations, petitions, talkings, doings. And this is something that I think we found in each other, very close to each other.
How beautiful. I was wondering if the circumstance, the conflict with his commission in Poland, was that something you knew about going into this filmmaking process, or did it come about?
I knew that this work of him in Poland about the Polish righteous to save the lives of Jewish people during the Second World War in Poland was very sensitive to start with, because he told me this. He showed me even this Facebook page of more than 1,500 people who already signed the petition against his work before his work was even established. And he was a bit in shock about it, because it never happened to him before that so many people are against something that he didn't even create yet. So that was in some ways even one of my original motivations to make this work, to make this film, because I knew that something interesting is going to happen, no matter what will be the end of this journey. If he will execute this work or if he will not, it's going to be interesting, because some people are going to be upset, some people are going to be happy. So this is quite a good recipe for good documentary scene. At the end, nothing happened. This work is not existing, and it will never exist. And the way he dealt with it was interesting for me to see, because when he goes to talk to Orna Porat, who is a very famous doctor, a very important person of Yad Vashem, the official historian person of Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, she said, don't do it, it's horrible if you do it, and he's convinced that he should not do it. Comes back home, tells his wife, we don't do it. Then he goes to talk to Professor Yuda Bauer, who is the biggest figure about the Holocaust studies, and he tells him, you must do it. And he said, okay, we must do it, then I have to do it. And then he goes to Berlin and he meets his very good friend, Wim Wenders, the director, and Wim tells him, yeah, you should do it. So he's very confused about it, which is for me a bless. For me, it's a beautiful thing to see someone who is very much confident and usually knows exactly what he's doing, like all of a sudden moving between yes and no, should I do, shouldn't I do? So it was interesting to document this process.
No, absolutely. And really for us as the viewers to see the responsibility that he takes for every work that he puts out there into the world. Another theme that came up throughout the film, I would say, is really the power of nature. Caravan being an artist that's deeply engaged in site-specific works and really connecting with space in that way. Can you talk to us a little bit about that and seeing him in the field with his works?
What comes to my mind right now when you ask about it or when you mention it and refer to it is that being with him made me or helped me or triggered me to look at the landscape and to look around me in a different way, because he had this magical ability, a magical tendency, maybe you could even say magical obsession, to look at the landscape, to look at the space around him in a very, very, very unique way that I never experienced before. So I think that sometimes it happens to me when I go to the desert, for example. I went like 2-3 weeks ago to this film festival in the desert in the south of Israel, that I looked around me and for a second I felt that those are the eyes of Danny Caravan that are inside my head, because he was able to look at so many different kind of dimensions of the same physical reality in the same time, and to not to divide them, like to see the harmony between them and the connections between them. And then you could see it also in his work, because this is the beauty of his work, like that it's not that he's putting some monument in the middle of the nature and there is a contradiction or something which is divided between the nature and his work. It's like merging the nature into his work and merging his work inside the nature. And this is something very beautiful to see.
Yeah, oh, that's great. You know, I was wondering if you could speak about the way that the film ends. You know, it was this exhibition that he wasn't able to attend, and you're hearing his voice over it, and it really, for me, resonated with this idea of mortality that we're thinking about throughout the film. You know, can you talk a little bit about it?
Well, that was a very strong moment, which, like many other strong moments, happened almost accidentally, because I was not so much feeling like going to this exhibition at all. It was a little bit far, and Danny is not there. So why should I go there without Danny? Because I already decided that I will only go with Danny to different places. But something inside of me told me I should do it, because I think only now, retroactively, I understand what was it. Like the fact that his daughter is going there, behalf of him, and the fact that it was so important for him that I will be there, emotionally it affected me, it touched me. And we didn't talk about it, but it was in a way obvious or clear that the question of what will happen after he will pass away was already there. It was already present in the air. And then I told myself, okay, so let's see what do we do with it. And it was actually my idea that she will play the sound message she got, the voice message she got from him, to everybody, because I felt that, hey, this is the thing. Like, he wants to be there, but he cannot. He wants to deliver a message, so he can, but in such of a weird way, and at the same time so emotional way. So for me, when I saw it in the editing room together with the editor, it felt like the end of the film. It felt like, what can be after this? It's obviously the end of his life. And since it is a very political work, with the olive trees and everything is in Hebrew and Arabic together, and it's especially for Israeli people, they understand the semantics of his work, talking about living together, Jews and Arabs, Palestinians and Israelis, and together with the message he sent her, I felt that for me it is almost a gift I have received from him, and a gift I want to deliver to you guys, the people who watch the film. So yes, that's why I decided to end the film with this message, and even says, I hope you understood the political message I tried to tell you. And for me, it was a moment when his message is also merging with my message as the filmmaker. So I felt very complete and happy about it.
Oh, beautiful. Is there any anecdote or challenge from the film that you want to share that maybe we haven't spoken about yet?
The only anecdote I think we could add to this conversation is that maybe at the end of the shooting of the first episode of the film, the first scene in the Negev monument, if you remember it, when he's like talking about Netanyahu and he's angry with me that I never heard about the Guernica, and he's talking about the relations between art and politics, and then he's freaking out and goes outside of the frame because I never heard about the Guernica. It's the opening scene of the film, but it's actually the last scene I ever filmed of Danny Caravan. And the reason I put it in the beginning was because it felt like a great way to open the film, because it is touching all the different elements of his life, and it is funny, and it is sad, and it is political, and it is personal, it's everything. At the end of this scene, we went down to the car and we already unpacked ourselves, and Lukasz Konopa, the co-director and the cinematographer of the film, who is a very good friend of mine and someone I love very much, told me, oh, Barak, you're genius, you're genius, you're genius. And I told him, what are you talking about? It like, what did they do? And he said, how you pretend yourself, not knowing what is Guernica, just in order to create a strong documentary scene. This is unbelievable. This is amazing. This is a magic. You're genius. And I told him, Lukasz, I'm sorry. I'm not genius. I'm ignorant. And until nowadays, I think he doesn't want to believe that he's spending his time with someone who is so stupid. But that's life.
It's so interesting to know that that actually was a time later in your filming relationship, and that it kind of came to that relationship where it was so comfortable that you spoke to each other so genuinely and easily. Well, thank you so much. I guess, I always like to end conversations with artists, with filmmakers. What's next for you? What are you working on now?
What am I doing right now is a new film called Capoeira in Front of God, and it's about ultra-Orthodox Jewish kids practicing capoeira in Bnei Brak, the largest Orthodox Jewish city in Israel. Hopefully in, I don't know, 2 years, something like this, it will come to Miami Jewish Film Festival, and hopefully not online, but physically.
In person. Well, thank you so much to director Barak Heymann. Congratulations to you on a wonderful film, High Maintenance. And thank you for joining me today for this conversation. Once again, want to thank all of the members, sponsors, and community partners, volunteers, and all you film lovers, as well as the Center of Advancement of Jewish Education, SAGE, and the Greater Miami Jewish Federation for participating in this milestone 25th Miami Jewish Film Festival. Thank you.